Ms. Walker, if you'll count down from 5 and start there.
We're ready now. Okay. We will now call the Monday, July 27th, 2020 meeting of the Princeton Board of Education to order. Mrs. Better, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Moore?
Here.
Mrs. Cleveland? Mrs.
Here.
Wider? Oh, Mrs. Wider?
Here.
Dr. Hawkins? Mr. Simons?
Here.
And now we will ask Mrs. Cleveland to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. Cleveland.
Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag.
Ready?
For the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We now need a motion for the approval and or revision of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve a revision of the agenda.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Mrs. Better, please call the roll.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wider?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. We now need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Mrs. Peck, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Wider?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Mrs.
Yes.
Cleveland, you say yes.
Yes.
Next is approval of the agreement with final forms for school year 2020-2021. Is there a discussion before we vote, or is somebody ready to make a motion?
I so move that we proceed as you stated.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Mrs. Petter, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wider?
Yes. Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is discussion of the preliminary report card. Mr. Burton, are you speaking to this?
Did we miss the approval of the new fund?
Yeah, there was, Mrs. Wider, we have the approval of resolution creating a new fund designation. That was the updated agenda.
Do you need a motion, Madam President?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to make a motion on behalf of the treasurer. The board approves requested approval of a resolution creating a new fund designation for coronavirus relief fund expenditures.
There a second?
Second.
Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mr. Simons?
Are we going to have any discussion on this?
Second.
Is there discussion?
Yes. Have we received funding previously?
No, not for this. This will be a different pot of money. And at this time, we don't have any details on this, but we have been given the information that it will have to go into a new fund number that is not in the accounting system. And before we can do anything with that, the board must approve the addition of a new fund number.
Did that happen last time?
This is probably the third or fourth fund number you guys have approved.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page.
Is there anything else on this item? No, I couldn't hear. Did we vote on this?
No, we have not.
Okay. Mr. Burton, would you like to talk about the opening plan?
Did we vote on the approval of resolution creating a new fund? I think we're just finished discussion, so we need to vote on that.
So we need to
I
have a
didn't hear
vote.
what you said. There's no.
Ms. White, Madam President, we need a vote for the agenda item 3B.
So Ms. Petter would be doing a roll call? Is that right?
Yes.
Are you hearing it, everything, Mrs. Moore?
I did not hear the roll call. I didn't hear my name.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Just static.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Whiter.
Yes. Motion passes.
Very good.
Mr. Burton, would you like to talk about the report card and/or the opening?
Sure, I'm going to talk about the reopening plan. And I just want to, probably everybody right now who's watching Facebook can certainly attest to the unique weather we're having outside. We've been begging for rain for quite some time to cool down, and it is just passed over our central office pretty aggressively. So I'm assuming that's why some of the technology is going in and out. So a couple of very quick things about the reopening plan. We made mention before that August 1st, we were going to let everybody know exactly a complete plan. Remember, all we're doing is waiting for the rest of the surveys to come out. And once the surveys come out, we're going to be able to have a really strong gauge on the number of students that have chosen, parents that have chosen remote learning. What we really were trying to avoid is saying to parents that if you don't do this, we're going to assign where your child is going to go. So if you're a parent and you're out there, you've not chosen, the time is now to make sure that happens. So we've called just about every single parent that has not had the opportunity to fill out a survey yet. So we will announce by the end of this week exactly whether or not we're going to come back every single day. You said there's only two ways we're coming back: every single day, or we're going to do a week A and a week B. Remember, a couple of times I talked about if we go the alternating schedule, we will come back week A, will be last name beginning with A through L. So my name's Burton, so I'd be going week A. Or we go letters M through Z would be week B. So those would be the alternating schedules. So there's only two ways we're coming back. We're coming back traditionally every day. And there's some caveats to that, but by and large, it's every single day. And then if you don't get the numbers that we think we're going to get, then we're going to do week A and week B an alternating schedule. So we will be very, very specific with how we roll out, but I want to be very clear on this, that this is all about giving voice to parents. We could clearly just say, this is what we're going to do. And maybe some parents would want that to happen. But ultimately, we want to make sure that we get a gauge of people. So as an example, we have some schools that have 86% of our parents that have filled out surveys. We know we have a really good gauge of what they're going to do, for sure. We have others that are down around 48 or 50%. We still need more support there. So all of that information is being disseminated tomorrow to principals, as well as great staff who's been working very hard trying to make these connections with parents who may not have had the opportunity to fill out the forms. But by the end of this week, if you haven't heard from you, I just want to be clear, then we have the right to place somebody educationally, and we're prepared to do so, whether that's going to be remote or we're going to say you can come back. So again, we've given lots of voice. The first deadline was July 14th. We extended that a little bit, and then we've been making calls. So again, we want that authentic collaboration and that input from parents, but we need parents to make sure they fill out the forms. And we've had many, many parents do that, to fill out the survey, and we need to make sure we get a little bit more to do so.
Can you help us explain the A and B, why there's an A and B?
Sure. So I'm glad you brought that up. So when we look at our numbers, for instance, let's look at the high school. So the high school has 1,823 students that are currently enrolled in the high school. Now we have some of those students we know that go to Scarlet Oaks. Can I get everybody to mute just so that for the people watching, that they don't hear the background noise? Thank you. So we have 823 that are enrolled. We have about 200 students that go to, Scarlet Oaks. So that would take that 1823 down to 1623. Then we have those students that chose remote learning. So we have just under 500 that chose that. So then that takes that down to about 1,100 students that if we go traditionally would come back full-time all the time. Now what we have to, the reason why we look at A week, B week is because we have to make sure that we socially distance appropriately, that we want to make sure that we have the proper spacing in the classroom. When we look at the capacity of the classroom, if we have normally 24 or 25 kids in a classroom in the high school or middle school, maybe sometimes even more, we cannot, those desks are not 6 feet apart. So we have to pull the desks out, set them up 6 feet and see what the capacity is in each classroom. So we have some that actually in the high school, we have some smaller rooms, which as we did that, we can only fit 8 to 12 desks. We have other classrooms we could fit no more than 18. So when we look across the board, if we can ensure that we're going to be able to socially distance in the classroom with coming back every day traditionally, then we must go with a week A, week B alternating schedule, which again, just to kind of prepare, if we announce going week A, week B schedule to start the year, week A will be those students with the last name beginning with A, and those students all the way through those students that have a last name beginning with L. That's week A. Week B would be those students with a last name beginning with M, all the way through to those students with a last name beginning with Z. Now we know that there's some families that may have a couple different unique situations, and we'll work through all of those. So perhaps if you're living in a home where last name is Adams, and maybe there's some other through guardianship and so forth, last name, Mikulski or whatever it may be, Mitchell, so forth, we're going to keep you in the same group. And so that's why we are trying to get information as soon as we can. The high school has been working really hard, middle school working really hard, just even today with scheduling. In the elementary school, scheduling looks and feels a little bit different. Remember, in the middle school, high school, the kids typically travel between classes. So that scheduling, we have to get information as quickly as we can. So again, we want to give that authentic input, but time is running out and we need to make decisions as everybody wants us to do. So we will make sure that we do that by August 1st for sure. And we'll announce very simply, we're going to go week A, week B, or we're going to go with the traditional every single day. Now there's a few caveats, but any adjustment to the schedule will only be for the benefit of our student population. For instance, we may do something really creative, like in the high school, we may block the schedule and then in the day a little bit early, and then as kids leave because of not being able to socially distance in a cafeteria, we may give you lunch as you leave. So there's a lot of creative things that not only us, but many other school districts are doing across the country, and really want to make sure that we are doing so authentically. And in fact, myself, Dr. Phillips, and Ms. Tanya West-Wright, I was able to call and talk to our great Deputy Superintendent of the state of Ohio, actually answered the phone when he was in the middle of cooking dinner. It was unbelievable, his dedication. I asked him specifically about the hours and the hour requirement. So there's some things that we know that we can do because of us choosing part remote and part traditional coming back. So we have great flexibility and we're going to exercise that. Now, maybe there's some people out there who are asking or thinking, what will my child do if I choose remote learning? So if you choose remote learning, there will be a schedule. We're going to use a platform, a couple different platforms, but secondary 6 through 12, we'll be using a platform called Edgenuity. Now, our teachers will still be delivering instruction. Our teachers will still be there to help and support, but that's a platform that many districts have used. It is a great platform. It gives us tremendous flexibility, and that's really what we need in this time and age. For those students that are elementary and below, we already have some platforms that we used before, and we're going to continue to do so. iReady and so forth. We're going to do a lot of innovative teaching as we have. I have to tell you, throughout this whole thing, I've had great collaboration and communication with our teaching association president and our classified president. It's been, the interaction has been very authentic. In fact, just last week, our PACE, which is our certified education association, called members together, as many members as they could get together. And they said, what do we need to do to optimally open and come back? And so they gave like literally so many pages, great questions that they posed. And then on top of that, some concerns that they had. Look, every single person right now should have concerns. These times are so different, are so unique. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm concerned. I have no problems with saying kids are going to come back. I have no problems. How they come back, we have to make sure we make the best decision for our students. And if we can't socially distance the right way, then we need to not have the kids back, or we need to do things creatively. And that's what we're doing. So again, parents, and if you know, if you're watching this Facebook Live event and you know that your next door neighbor or maybe a sister or brother has not filled out that form, please make sure that they do so. And if you have questions about the remote, you guys can reach out to us, no problem. And again, our hotline number is 513-864-1162. I wanted to make sure, I hadn't said that in like a week. So again, 513-864-1162. And certainly appreciate Chris Lockhart for giving me the signals over there. So if you have questions, please reach out, make sure you do that. Now, if you're really, really unsure and you're like, well, I want to make sure there's safeguards or whatever, rest assured, we will have safeguards in place. Now, in life, there are no guarantees, but I will tell you that we are going to have massive cleaning. We're going to make sure that what we do each and every day, you should feel comfortable. But if at any time you don't feel comfortable, you need to let us know. And then perhaps maybe remote is that option. But once you go remote, it is a semester, for sure, a semester commitment. You could also commit to a year. And right now we have about half of the people, about 1,300 that have committed to a semester and the other half year long. But please make sure if you see Princeton City Schools calling you, you pick up so that we can help you with any other questions that you may have. Now, some of the biggest questions that we've been answering of late are, what about if my child is identified with special needs? What about my child? So the long and short of it, and very, very direct, is everything's based upon the IEP, your child's IEP. Now, there's still so many questions, and it's highly individualized, as it should be by federal law. But I've asked our Director of Special Education, Ms. Teresa Warren, and she's going to take over the screen, and she's going to do a great job presenting, seeing the slides. So hopefully all these questions, all your questions will be answered with the slides. But if not, I would just encourage you to continue to reach out to Teresa and her wonderful staff. Teresa?
Thank you. We have had a lot of questions around special education, and so we wanted to make sure we addressed that. Like Mr. Burton said, it's challenging to send out a district-wide communication because each of those conversations is individualized to that child and what that child needs. So we put together some general information that we hope will help. And we are always available for phone calls or emails to try to address those individual conversations. So on the next slide, I wanted to just outline kind of the topics that I'm going to go over. So we're going to talk about our goals for starting the school year, the planning process that has been in place, the key considerations that came from the task force work, the learning options that are available for students with disabilities, specific IEP considerations, supports that we have put in place, and the next steps that parents can expect to see. So our goal through this whole process is, number one, to collaborate with families. We want to make sure that children with disabilities have appropriate access to their education and their support services as much as we can do safely. And that's going to take partnership with our families to make sure that we have all of the information that we need to address their safety and their education. We saw from the spring that we really need to be intentional about giving parents the support and training that they need to help their child during this time. And then also educating our staff with the necessary information about specific student needs, as well as resources that they can use to support them through this unusual time. So the planning process with our staff, with all of the reopening task force meetings, we have had a variety of special ed staff participating and represented in that, including related service people, intervention specialists, school psychologists, paraprofessionals, to make sure that we're looking at all angles as we're planning district-wide. We've also had separate meetings after those task force meetings to specifically discuss special education concerns as it relates to our students and the unique needs that they have. And we've gone through and analyzed the staff, student, and parent surveys, specifically through that special ed perspective, to make sure that we are responding to the feedback that our parents and students and staff were giving us from our experiences this spring. Some of the key considerations from the task force work that we did, I'm not going to read all of these, but we really heard loud and clear that, we need intentional training for parents and for staff members to make sure that we're meeting the needs of those students. We're looking at all of the guidance that the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Special Education Programs, the Ohio Department of Education, and then the Office of Exceptional Children has put out to make sure we're staying compliant with all of our federal and state guidelines in terms of writing and paperwork processes, as well as servicing students and making sure that we're being compliant with the IEPs that have been written. Facilitating meaningful parent and team participation and planning for meaningful secondary transition services given the situation and where they may not be able to go out into the community as they usually do. So those are some of the key things that we pulled out of all of the readings and feedback that we received. So the learning options for students with disabilities is the same option that every student has. They can either choose that face-to-face, which is either the traditional 5 days a week or the blended learning, depending on what the district decides to do, or they can choose remote. And additional considerations will be discussed with parents in August to determine a learning plan that best meets their child's needs. So some of the things that those schools will be reaching out and considering with families are that individualized schedule and plan to make sure those students have continuity with their learning and are receiving the services that are listed on the IEP, specific health and safety protocols that may be needed. We have a lot of students who may need help with daily living skills or might need hand-over-hand assistance with tasks or to remain engaged in their learning. So discussing exactly what that needs to look like to make sure the child is remaining safe and the staff is also following safety protocols. And then additional accommodations and modifications that may be needed. For instance, if a student is not able to wear a mask at all, or as long as other students, making sure that we know that up front and we have a plan for how to address that up front so that we don't run into issues once they're in the school building. Like I said before, for IEP considerations, we're using all of the guidance that our federal and state agencies are putting out. We're staying up to date on those. We have also been in close contact with our attorneys to make sure that we're developing a plan that best serves our students and that we're following their IEP to the best extent possible given the situation that we're planning through. ETR and IEP meetings will still be occurring within the legal timelines. None of that has changed from a federal perspective. The meetings will most likely be virtual to maintain the guidance of limiting visitors into buildings. IEP services and progress monitoring are continuing to the extent possible given the circumstances. Distance learning plans will be developed with families to address remote learning needs. This would cover not only families who have chosen the remote option for their student, either for the semester or for the full year, but it would also cover students that chose the traditional or face-to-face instruction if we get to a situation where the district has to close for a certain amount of time. So sitting down with families to really look at changes that would need to happen to the services to make sure we're addressing their needs if they are remote learning. And we're going to be reviewing individual student data to determine where those students are performing right now and what their current service needs are. So some additional supports that we've put in place based on what we learned from the spring and the feedback we received. We know that we need additional online resources and training. So that is being provided to our staff in August with those days of professional development so that we can provide appropriate intervention services in either a blended or a face-to-face or full remote situation so that they have access to a broader array of options for intervention. One of the big pieces of feedback that we received was having a consistent learning platform so that not only parents and students were able to clearly access all of their assignments. But our staff that are working with multiple buildings, multiple grade levels, and multiple teachers can streamline all of that. So the district has gone with Google Classroom as that platform. So we think that will help in terms of making sure all of the services for students are coordinated in one place and that it's easier for everyone to access. And we are developing a resource website specifically for families of children with disabilities. We do have a frequently asked questions page that is being added to the district website, but we're also providing a specialized place for supports where we can post things like social stories, that parents could use at home to help their children understand social distancing or the importance of wearing a mask. Some of the new procedures that we will have in the building in terms of how we navigate in the hallways and why those things are important. So we're developing a specialized place for those so that parents can start using that as a resource with their children before we return to school. Related services would cover speech, occupational and physical therapy. Those will be provided either face-to-face or through teleservices, depending on the learning option that parents select. So our staff has more access than they did in the spring in terms of materials and resources online to provide those therapies. And again, when we meet with families in August to talk through their individual plans, that will be a part of the conversation to determine what that service will look like and how it will be delivered. And then paraprofessionals will continue to support students in and out of the classroom, providing assistance with daily living tasks, support with academic tasks, check-ins with students, and increasing that engagement. So all of the pieces that are part of each child's IEP, we are doing our best to implement to the best extent possible with the learning situation that's going to be the safest and most comfortable for the child. One of the things that we did want to address is that due to the nature of some of these services, students and staff will be in close contact. For instance, if your child has a paraprofessional that supports them for part of their day, that requires them to do some hand-over-hand assistance for certain tasks or for some of those daily living skills that they are working on, they will be in close contact to provide those services. Staff will be wearing appropriate PPE and students will be required to wear a mask if they are able to. Again, all of those individualized decisions will be made at the school level with the parent during those August conversations. And then we have purchased additional materials to make sure that we have individual supplies when possible, as well as so that we can have therapy materials at home if the students are participating in remote learning. So making sure that students have the materials they need wherever they're learning to make sure that we're making progress on their IEP goals. So next steps that parents can expect, we will have parent meetings scheduled with school teams to review the data and develop those distance learning plans and talk about any additional accommodations or modifications that those students need when they return either back to school or in a remote setting. Parent trainings specifically for children with disabilities will be offered in terms of strategies that that would be helpful for them to use with their children, answer questions about how to support their child in their learning. That could be using technology. Some of our students use technology specifically for communication purposes, and sometimes they're very specialized. So making sure parents can support their children at home with that as they continue through the school year. Staff will have additional training in specialized areas in August. with those additional intervention pieces that we put in place so that they understand all of the resources at their disposal. And then staff will have dedicated time to meet as teams and with families to develop those individualized plans. So that's kind of a broad stroke. And like Mr. Burton said earlier, it's really hard to kind of get into the nitty gritty of each of the questions that we receive because it's going to be individualized based on that student. And that's the purpose of those August meetings, is to make sure that parents have a voice at the table to say, this is what my child needs. And so that we can partner with them and make sure that we're developing plans that meet the child's needs and meet all of the safety protocols that we have to follow as well.
Is this the time for questions?
Sure.
Okay, I think that what you've laid out is very good if it's full-time, in person. For those families who may not have had the educational training, how do we, as a district, assist them when their child is on the B schedule, and meaning that they're at home?
So part of the conversation in those August meetings is going to be looking at prioritizing what skills the student is working towards when they are in the building on that A week versus what they would access remotely if we are on an alternating schedule. The other part of that conversation is that we may look at whether those students need to be in the building more often than their typical peers if we are on an alternating schedule. So some of our students who have significant needs need that continuity and need to access their services 5 days a week, every week. And so that would be a consideration for that school team and the family to talk about.
Would that be written into a new IEP, so to speak?
At this point, we are documenting that in a remote learning plan versus changing the IEP document. All of the guidance that we've received is that that IEP document should be what that team feels the student needs in a normal learning environment, which would be 5 days a week, face-to-face. So we don't want to change the actual IEP document because that's what we're recommending is best case scenario for that student. So we're creating a separate document that's going to be kind of that temporary if they chose remote learning or if we have to switch as a district to remote learning, that we've outlined what changes would need to happen to address their needs. And all of that would be documented in a prior written notice, which is required after IEP teams meet to kind of summarize what the decisions were. So that would be documented in a prior written notice.
Okay.
It sounds like a very good plan, a very proactive plan. And I'm not sure if I heard you say this, but are you all actually being proactive in reaching out to the parents of children who might have special needs and IEPs?
We have received a lot of calls. I've had multiple conversations with families, particularly of students with more significant needs. Given the number of students that we're talking about, we have not started reaching out. That will start happening next week once the special education coordinators and some of our other staff members are back. But we are definitely responding to parents that have reached out and are trying to put out information that's generalized enough to try and, answer some of the questions that they have.
For the district overall, how many students are we talking about that might have special needs or an IEP?
About 900.
Thank you.
One question, given what you just referenced, the amount of students that we would need to reach out to, how are we handling it in terms of scheduling it between the beginning of August and the first day of school? Just out of curiosity, how are we mapping that out to make sure that every child who we need to get in front of, we can?
Certainly the specialized classrooms, the students who access those programs will be prioritized in terms of setting up those meetings because their needs are more intensive. So those meetings will be prioritized starting at the beginning of August. And then for students who may receive supports just in the general education classroom and may not need as many modifications or accommodations changed, those will be the meetings that are happening later as we start the school year.
I wonder, of the children, the 900 children, do any of them have specific pre-existing conditions from a medical perspective where you need additional nurses or staff to handle that? I don't know if that is a concern.
Certainly, many of those students do have underlying conditions. We've been in contact with the agencies that we contract with that provide our one-on-one nursing services, as well as those parents to make sure we know whether they're going to come back face-to-face or not. A lot of them have had to choose the remote option, and we're working through what that could look like to make sure that their health is the number one thing that we're taking care of, and then how to address their educational needs after that.
Thank you.
And speaking on health, can you speak to this whole social distancing for parents in the general population as well, just how we're addressing it with our kids with special needs and understanding, or trying to make sure that they understand the social distancing aspect if they're in the same, in with the general population?
So we have started developing and are compiling social stories and kind of lessons and interventions to really explain and be really explicit about what that means. What does it mean to be socially distant? Why is it important? What could happen if you aren't? So really working through that. We certainly know that we have students that are working on that in their IEP, particularly just those social skills and those social cues that some students struggle with. So we're kind of putting a bank of resources together so that parents have access to them online, as well as intervention specialists and teachers will be reinforcing that and teaching those skills as we get back into the school building.
Thank you.
I agree with Gina. It sounds like a very well thought out, comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Excellent job. One of the things that, again, this has been one of these topics that many people have had specific questions for. We know that the parents, our parents in the district do an amazing job. We know the heroic work that's done by our staff. But I would just encourage each parent that does have questions specifically related to any special education needs to reach out to Teresa Warren. If there's any other issues that you may have regarding other special populations, gifted population, English learner population, to reach out to me, and I'll make sure that we get you the answers that you need. And again, our hotline number is 513-864-1162. There are so many things to consider that I just kind of once again want to thank everybody for their input. Again, the great work that we've been doing along with the teachers and classified staff. Again, having just about daily conversations and the great work. The ideas that, some of our ideas that we've come up with, and some of the reason why we've delayed is because when people have concerns moving forward, we have to make sure that we listen. Now, the difficult piece about listening is you can listen authentically, but if you don't do what somebody thinks that you should do, doesn't mean you don't listen. So we're really being very deliberate with what we're doing. And again, I just want to reiterate that if we can't socially distance the right way, which again is twofold actually, 6 feet is what they recommend. If you are within 6 feet, you could put a plexiglass barrier in between two students. Now we just have to understand that that's helping stop the spread of COVID, but it still may mean that one of our students or some of our students may need a quarantine. So again, the definition is if you're within 6 feet for 15 minutes cumulatively over a 48-hour period of time with someone who's positively identified or diagnosed with COVID, you must quarantine for 14 days. So we fully anticipate, we know COVID will be in the school. There are no guarantees other than the fact that we're going to clean, we're going to disinfect, we're going to have systems in place. But if somebody comes into school with COVID, they could be asymptomatic. We're going to do whatever we can to identify that very quickly to make sure that we follow all protocols. We communicate with Springdale Health Department as well as Hamilton Health Department, and we've had great collaborations with both of them. But I have to say that right now we've been pushing Hamilton County to make sure that we get specific information so we know how many students in our district have positively been identified with COVID, diagnosed with COVID, ages 5 through 18. Now we can't get the specifics, but at least we get those age ranges that will help us inform to be able to make a great decision. So the more information we have, the better it is. And again, I want to thank all the administrators, the teachers, all the staff for doing an amazing job of helping put together this plan. And again, when we announce everything this week, it will be very deliberate. We will have presentations. We'll have information that will be available on Facebook, on our website. We're going to do all calls. We'll make sure that we put as much information out as we possibly can. Twitter, Instagram, everything except for TikTok. I will not be doing some TikTok, doing some crazy dance move.
Why not? Why not?
For that reason. Chris Lockhart could do the robot like me, but this is a professional board meeting. Anyway, I did want to also say this, that when the decisions that we ultimately will make is taking into account the best interests of our students. Doesn't mean everyone's going to agree, but we welcome those people who may not agree with us. Please give us a call. We'll do the best that we can answering all questions to try to ease any concerns that you may have. So I don't know, Ms. White, if there's any other questions, but I'm prepared to move to the second part.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, what was your second part before I asked the question? Your second part might cover my question.
Well, it's about grants, but go ahead, Gina.
Oh, okay. So school is still going to start August 26th, right? August 20th. I don't want to give wrong information. School's still going to start August 20th.
August 20th. In the last board meeting, we blasted it all over the place.
You sure did. You sure did.
We added 5 days, with some of the day will be professional development, but the vast majority of the day will be teacher prep time to allow our teachers to do what they do best, which is create these innovative lessons and engagement, and also work through some of the logistical concerns that we may have. We will be working on logistical concerns the day, the minute, the second when kids walk in the building. I'm honest about it. We're going to come up with things that we didn't think about literally walking in the building. But when you're able to be fast, fluid, and flexible and do the things that we need to do, that's why I think that, we're in really good shape. But right now there's going to be answers or questions that we don't know the answers to. But when we start school, we will know those. And speaking of that, let me show you one thing. Chris, if you could pull that up. This is what I'm talking about, the need to make sure that we have data. So when we look at this, not this one, the one that Tricia sent. No, we're going to back up on that one. we're going to look at the data that we have, and it's just one slide that just shows all the data for the survey.
Hey, while that's coming up, can I ask a question?
Fire away. Yep.
Mr. Burton, now, when school starts on the 20th, for those parents you have not heard from, what happens with them? Will they automatically be put in the in-person schooling plan or the remote one?
Well, as long as we have the right number, the phone number, we will get a hold of the parents. So this is going to go out. We've had lots of people on this Facebook Live event. We're going to post this all over the place. If you have not received any information from Princeton City Schools, it is not because we've not tried. So if you haven't received anything via email, if you haven't received anything from via phone, text, Twitter, whatever, please reach out to your building. So if you have multiple children, just reach out to all of them to make sure that we have your most updated information so we can reach out to you.
Yeah.
Again, if you haven't heard from us, please make sure. And I know sometimes people say, well, I haven't seen it, whatever. And I'm not trying to like play getcha gotcha with any parents. Just please, if you haven't heard anything, just reach out to us. Call the hotline, give us the information. We'll reach out to you right away.
But if they just show up for school on the 20th, you'll tell them which one they're in. It'll work out.
They show up to school on the 20th and we go A week, B week. We're going to have a transition time to help make sure that everybody, when they transition. So for instance, we may do like Thursday, maybe A students, Friday, maybe B students, just so that we can acclimate them into the system and ensure that all rules and everything are properly followed. Because what we don't want to do is start too early and have a week, like 2 days a week, and then the kids have to wait another 5 days to get into it. So there's a lot of great work that Tanya West-Wright and her team, Dr. Mary Phillips, with the curriculum instruction and assessment team that put together, and again with the principals. But I'm going to pull up this slide.
Yeah. So what percentage though of the kids, that 1,800 number you gave, that's just for high school kids?
I'm going to show you right here.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
asked for it, you got it. It's
No,
like,
that's not what I was going to ask. I was going to ask you, what percentage of them have pre-existing medical conditions?
yeah, well, we won't know that unless the parents reach out to us, unless they have an IEP where it specifically addresses that. So,
Okay.
So, and quite frankly, we're not asking parents to tell us that. If they have pre-existing health conditions and you want to keep them home, keep them home. No problem. We're going to educate them. You need Wi-Fi, we're going to get you Wi-Fi. You need technology, we're going to get you what you need. We will, and I've been very deliberate about this, and I tweeted about this the other day. I copied Lieutenant Governor John Husted on it. I copied Governor DeWine, Paula DiMaria, the superintendent, the deputy superintendent, Dr. John Richard. I copied anybody that I could think of to let them know that at Princeton, we are going to provide Wi-Fi for each student. Now,
That's great.
now Lieutenant Governor Husted, actually, there's going to be a big matching grant process that would be followed for connectivity. So I believe he was able to secure $50 million through the state of Ohio. And yeah, there's a matching grant, and we're going to do that, but we've committed, and because the Board of Education has been so dogged and supportive of what we're doing, every single one of our students will have it. And there's going to be a little process that people will need to follow, but I'm telling you, every one of our students will have Wi-Fi. As long as you have to communicate with us, you have to do it, but we're going to reach out. We need two-way communication, and we're going to make it happen. So, and speaking of parents, I just want to hit this one thing very, very quickly. We need your help, parents. And I've said this before, that we're going to require masks, cloth masks. You have 4 weeks to make sure, just about 4 weeks, to make sure that you have a couple masks that your son or daughter, sons and daughters can wear. That is absolutely critical. We have actually temperature strips that we have that go right on your forehead here. And for those of you who are old like me, you may remember the mood ring and you'd wear the mood ring and it would change colors. It's all based upon body temperature. So when you wear that right here, it's reusable and it takes your temperature. Every day I've come into the office, I have checked my temperature every day without exception. Without exception, I got that strip and put it on my forehead. It has worked every single time. So now we're going to send everything out. We're going to send 4 to every parent. So in case you need additional time to get a thermometer, you can use these strips, but they're reusable and they last. I've had one for the last 2.5 weeks. I've been using it ever since. I keep it in a plastic bag. Nobody uses it. I use it and I test it. So that's going to be something that's going to be really critical. But parents, please understand that if you take your son's or daughter's temperature and it is above 100, do not send your son or daughter to school. That is per CDC, that's per Hamilton County, and that's per us. We need you to do that. You need to keep your son or daughter home. Now, if you send your son or daughter to school and we don't know that there's a fever, it actually potentially can expose an entire learning environment. Now, I know you would never want to do that, but let's just say you do send your son or daughter and we find out first period or in the very beginning of the day that they have a fever. And when we take it, we're going to need you to come right away to pick up your son or daughter. So we're going to have additional information about that and some of the regulations to make sure that you follow through. But we need your emergency medical form to be accurate. And if we can't get you, we need a second person we can get to, or even a third person. This is serious. We can't have students in our isolation room for long periods of time. It's not healthy for your son or daughter. It's not healthy for the staff or for the entire environment. So please make sure you remember those words. And we are going to do all call after all call to ensure that we have accurate information the best that we can. But let's take a look at this document very quickly. So you look at this right at the very top, you see on the left-hand side, building average daily membership. That's how many students are in school. So that's 215 at Evendale. And we have 120 parents that have responded. Of that, 70 have chosen to go face-to-face, whether it's alternating schedule or every single day. We have 28 that chose remote, 22 that chose full year, for a total of 50 total students, which represents 23.26% of the population. So can we appropriately socially distant at Evendale if you take 50 students out of the mix? The answer to that question is yes. We feel we can do that. A little bit tight, but we feel we can do that. Here's where the issue is. When you look at some of the other schools and just the sheer numbers, we may not be able to do that. So by the end of the week, we may very well say for the first quarter, this is what we're going to do. Or the first 2 weeks, this is what we're going to do until we get a handle, because sometimes parents, and Gina Ruffin Moore, you asked $1 million question tonight. I don't even know if you know you did that, but you did. You said, what happens if students just show up day one? And that's a concern for us. Because if we say we're going to come back traditionally and we have all these kids come back, we may not be able to socially distance and we could put a lot of people in harm's way. We will not do that. So based upon the next couple of days, and it's really big, the next couple of days, that's when we will make our final decision. So if you look down here, the total number of students that have chosen remote learning, we're right around 1,400, a little bit over 1,400. So we still have a little bit more to gain, and we've been very diligent. I appreciate so much the volunteers that have been calling people. We had a whole slew of people come in last week to make those calls over the weekend and even today. So that's that. I don't know if anybody has any questions on this, but if not, I'm prepared to move to 4B. Chris, you take it.
Question, Tom, is the percentages that are remaining, do we have a plan, an active plan or a passive plan to close that gap?
We have an actively aggressive plan.
Okay.
We have been calling, we will continue to call. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to send out all the people we have not been able to contact to the building principal. Sometimes people, if I call somebody from my cell phone, I still have a Cleveland cell phone. It's a Cleveland number. But it's kind of good though, because sometimes it looks like a business, Mary. So if I call, sometimes people don't answer, and I can say, well, I called them. But, so that's why, seriously, folks, if you get a call from Princeton City Schools, please pick up. Please, we're not going to try to sell you anything. All we need to do is answer the survey so that we can make the most informed decision.
Mr. Burton,
Yes,
may I
ma'am.
ask another question? In terms of staff, now you have an idea of your students returning,
Mhm.
but of your staff that's actually returning, what percentage is not returning in terms of teachers and staff?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're in the middle of compiling that. Actually, there's going to be a survey that's going to be sent out later this week, and it's going to be a couple fold. We know that there are teachers that have pre-existing health conditions, and we're really concerned about them. We have other parents or other teachers that don't necessarily have the pre-existing health conditions, but they really would like to do remote teaching. And they may have some concerns about whether or not they just want to come back in general, or they know they may have a loved one that's visiting them in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And so they're concerned about that. So that's going to be another series of teachers that we may have that want to do remote. And then we're going to make sure that we make the best decision for our kids. So we're pulling all that information together.
Do you know about how many teachers have made such a decision, or is it too soon to tell?
Well, in the
No,
very
you're trying to plan your rooms out and who's going to be in them.
Oh, absolutely. In the very beginning of the summer, I think it was actually at the end of spring, at the beginning of summer in June, we had sent out those surveys. And of all the surveys of all the teachers and all the staff, over 750, we had about 60 total that said they'd like to go remote or they had to go remote. Okay. So there's two things there combining. Now, I don't know where those numbers are right now because, again, things change. And so we're putting that out this week. Again, all the associations have been amazing. And as we get more information, and the staff has been very diligent, we'll share that.
I just got one last question. I'll wait, let somebody else ask. Sorry. Well, okay, I'll go ahead then. In terms of the maintenance staff,
Mhm.
have you, I might be getting too deep, but I'm wondering if you are possibly in need of hiring additional maintenance staff, and also in terms of full-time nurses. I mean, does every school have a nurse? Because I'm just curious. We're telling the students to check their temperature, but when our staff and employees come to work, and when the bus drivers get on the bus, are they checking, or are we checking their temperatures?
We will follow the exact procedure that we've had ever since the very onset of that. When we start letting some staff come back in, they must get their temperature checked. They must sign off. And so, yeah, we're going to follow that same procedure that we followed before. And I know you've asked a couple different times specifically about the maintenance staff. So in fact, Mr. Fricky, our director of operations, and myself and Dr. Phillips and others, we looked at those numbers today about staffing and then the flow and the systems. Now it may look a little different than traditional, just like traditional teaching is going to look the same. We're actually going to redefine the way that education looks. And we may redefine the way that the cleaning schedule is to ensure that we're getting in and out of classrooms the best that we can, but we're going to need help from teachers and students cleaning as well, the desks. We're going to get in and out of classrooms. We're going to get in and out of high use areas and make sure. But Mr. Fricky and Todd Kutel and many others, they have great plans. And specifically regarding nurses, if you remember the last, it was two board meetings ago, you asked a question and we ensured that there was going to be a medical staff member at each building, and we will. Whether
Is a medical staff member a nurse?
It'll be a healthcare specialist or nurse, but even a healthcare specialist has to be an LPN.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I didn't know. Thank you.
Okay. That's okay. I welcome your questions.
I appreciate your answers.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Wider, am I clear to go with the second agenda?
You are clear. I will just tell Mrs. Moore that at the Princeton Operations Center, every maintenance person, every food service worker, every transportation person, and every Princeton closet person signs in, takes a temperature, and does all that every single day.
I knew it. That's excellent news.
And mine is consistently 97.3.
All right, 97.3. Great.
Go ahead, Mr. Burton.
Okay, thank you. So a couple board meetings ago, we talked a little bit about grants. So let me pull up this first slide and just kind of refresh your memory about what the grants, like what the allowable uses of grants are. So again, when you look at this, there's a couple different, there's an object and there's a purpose, right? So when you look at that on the left-hand side, you see that you could use grant funds for salaries, retirement, purchase services, which could be something like we may have a professional development initiative, and we may pay for that out of what's called Title IIA. So we get about $223,000 a year, and we'll go over all the numbers on the next slide, which will be here in a second. But we may hire somebody to come in and work with our staff. And the reason why we may hire that person to come in to work with our staff, it's less expensive to do that in just about any case than it is to send our teachers out to learn or our staff out to go to a conference. So we will be doing more and more, bringing people in, doing virtual work and so forth, because right now, especially with traveling and quarantining and all that, we need to be very, very deliberate and make sure that we keep our staff safe. And so purchase services, that would be an example. Supplies, you probably can guess what supplies are. But out of Title I, and Tanya West-Wright does an amazing job with Title I funds, but she actually was able to help, she reduced some of the supplies that we typically require on our supply list. And some of that's going to be paid for out of Title I funds. So again, an allowable use would be maybe pencils and other supplies that we may need for the face-to-face instruction. Capital outlay, that's kind of much bigger items. It would be perhaps purchasing of Chromebooks, or it could be kind of renovating a whole area specifically for maybe STEM use. But bigger ticket items are capital outlay. And then indirect costs, administrative costs. Let me share this with some of our friends. We have not always taken administrative costs, and each grant allows you to do that up to 5%. So we will be taking administrative costs on our grants this year. So a lot of people don't understand this, but there's money that we get that goes directly to private and parochial schools based upon the number of students they have that wouldn't typically, if they were at Princeton, would be receiving Title I services. So it's just a flow through, but we are allowed to keep administrative costs because of the amount of time it costs us to have meetings, to provide reports and so forth. So as an example, Dr. Michelle Kokar has spent literally days trying to get in contact with different principals and grant workers at different private and parochial schools, because we have to have these conversations. And if we don't, then sometimes that's where miscommunication happens or no communication happens, and people feel like they can spend money any way they want. But we control the money and we oversee it. And so we have to ensure that the private and parochial schools are using that money the right way. And then if you look at the purpose of some of this, as I mentioned, the instruction, support services, professional development. One of what we're really doing, we're using some money for this year, is when we put together our family community engagement plans. And you guys already have seen, if you haven't, you certainly will when when the Viking report comes out later on next week. It should be in everybody's mailboxes the next week, or for sure the week after that. But specifically looking at our learning series for parents. So we're going to have one each month. We're going to do it virtually. We'll do it in person. We're going to do whatever we can, again, to help parents be as informed as they can and as learned as they can to help their sons and daughters. And then also you see here facilities and also transportation. So if you go to the next slide, we look specifically at the numbers that we're talking about. So if you look specifically, the state and federal grants, and again, Title 1A, you see that's a big number. That's a big number, $1.79 million. So a lot of that is used on our Title I staff. A lot of it could be used with our great instructional coaches. So that money we use directly to help support Title I services. When you look at Title IIA, again, an example I gave you was professional development. So $223,000 we get. That's, again, a big number. Title III are for English learning services, learner services, and so forth. And it goes all the way here. And you see that there's some big numbers down there. Now, we have gone for a lot of competitive grants, been very aggressive in doing so. So if you look to the right-hand side, we have an Innovative Strategies grant, $125,000 over 2 years. Martha Holder Jennings grant, $14,000. A private foundation wrote a grant, almost $250,000 over 4 years. We have other grants that we've gone after as well. And I think I've mentioned this before, but we have partnered with NIMS. And if we get that grant through the Department of Defense, we will earn $750,000. And this STEM grant will allow us to have a STEM bus that will go out into the community. We'll be able to hire a couple staff members. It's going to be very innovative. We're going to go out and about. It's going to be phenomenal. But we don't know if we're going to get it or not. We also have about $600,000 that still has not been granted yet that we hope we get, $200,000 for another grant through the State Department of Education. And we should find out about that probably within another 3 weeks at the latest, 4 at extreme latest. And so you see that it's not good enough. We're not just resting on and having all taxpayers just pay taxes, and we're not going to go aggressively after alternative revenue streams. So the left, state and federal, so we get that based upon certain percentages. And on the right, that's what we go after aggressively. And we've done that, and we will continue to do that. Our goal, my goal as superintendent, is to bring in $1 million a year, year over year, with grants, because we're doing great work, but we need great support. And we can't always go back to the taxpayers, even though the taxpayers certainly have shown their wonderful support of Princeton. But we also told them we're going to continue to look for alternative revenue streams, which is exactly why a couple of board meetings ago, you guys approved a partnership with Team Sports and Adidas. So that right there, we get $25,000 a year over the term of that, plus additional points that we could use for merchandise. We have a great relationship and a great partnership with Mercy Health, a great relationship and partnership with Jake Sweeney. We have great partnership, again, with Emory Federal Credit Union, with First National Bank, and the list goes on. And we will continue to go after partnerships, which will help us continue to push the envelope, but also lessen the burden on taxpayers. So I'm looking forward to answering any questions you guys may have. And I hope that this provided the level of specificity to help with some of the discussions you guys may be having in the community.
I have a question, but it goes back to 4A, and I apologize for that, but I think there just needs to be a little bit of clarification. If I choose the remote learning option, talk to me about participating in extracurriculars and activities and music and band and that sort of thing.
Okay, well, if you choose remote, you still will be able to participate as long as they allow that. If they allow sports to continue, if they allow music to continue, band and sing, because Butler County, from what I understand, there's no choir, There's no band, woodwind and wind instruments not allowing, excuse me, that was a mouthful right there.
Well, I'm just referring as far as Princeton's policy is concerned, not the health commissioners.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. If Hamilton County still allows it, we're going to still allow it. You will still be able to participate in sports. You'll still be able to participate in marching band if you have it. But there's a reason why I'm saying it like that. If they allow it to continue.
Okay, and then as far as the curriculum is concerned, physical education, art, that sort of thing. If you're an in-person.
For in-person, we're going to do everything that we can to, again, have the consistency of all those programs. We do know that there's great flexibility that we have through the state of Ohio. We may need some people to help out, some teachers help out in other areas, but we have schedules. And right now, this is particularly germane to middle school and high school. Not that elementary phys ed and music is critical, but it's different when you have 1,000 kids that are supposed to moving from point A to point B. It's a lot different than in the elementary school. So we're looking at all those schedules right now. But our intention is to still have those as best that we can. But quite frankly, when you look at phys ed, we're not going to, if we're not allowed to have contact sports outside of the traditional school day extracurricular, we're not going to have basketball in physical education or soccer in physical education. So it's going to look very different.
Okay.
Hey, Tom, just real quick, probably, mundane at this point, but maybe not. School supply list, are they out?
So, yeah, they will be out. In fact, Tanya West Wright evaluated with her principals, evaluated all of the supply lists. And here's the thing. We've taken quite a bit off because we know there's a great burden on parents. We're going to help with the supplies. We're going to do the best that we can. But again, if any child needs supplies and they don't have it, we have wonderful partners. We have the Princeton Closet. We have Calvary Church. We have United Methodist, and literally the list goes on and on. St. Monica Center. All of those entities have pledged support and help with whether it's supplies or some other ones. And everybody certainly contributed. But I know that there's a lot of supplies. Glendale, I know, provides supplies for some students, not all students at Glendale, but some students. And all of that helps. And we need to continue to have that. But if kids need, we will provide. So that list is one example. I'm sorry, Mary. One example are Kleenexes. As you could imagine, a box of Kleenex, it doesn't take long for kids to go through Kleenexes. It's so that number I know has been reduced. I know the number of pencils has been reduced and so forth. So that should be out there on the website. And if it's not out there right now, it certainly will be out there by the end of the week, and we'll make sure we get all that out to all the parents.
And then making sure that on those supply lists, you add the PPE that's needed, masks. Is that correct?
We will certainly have masks on that list. We also will be asking people. Now, we have tons of hand sanitizer. We do. And there's a big difference between hand sanitizer and your own personal mask. Now, just the other day, I was driving through one of our great communities, and I saw 4 of our students. They were walking down the street with masks on and all appropriate. They walked into UDF. They got what they needed. They were socially distancing. I told them, I said, I'm so proud of you. And they said, why wouldn't we do this? And so I think one's listening right now. I'm not going to kick you under the bus, but you know that how proud I was that you're helping stop the spread. And that's why it's so critical that we wear masks. Parents, it's critical that you do that.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Burton?
No, ma'am. Just again, thank you to all those volunteers that have come in to make phone calls. Thank you to both of our associations for the great work. We know that sticking together, we're going to be able to continue to make the best decisions for our students. This is heavy lifting, and it's not for the faint of heart, but we will continue to stay together and work as hard as we can. And again, we couldn't do it without that great collaboration and the support of the Board of Education. You guys have been amazing through this. And as Gina Ruffin-Moore would say, if there's any questions at all, come to me. I will answer any and all questions. I'll give you the number. And again, if there's any really difficult questions, call Dr. Phillips.
Between the two of you, mission accomplished.
Exactly. Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the cause?
Just that you guys all should have a link I sent you for executive session.
If not, I move now that we move into executive session to discuss under sections 121.22G, 1, 4, and 5 of the Ohio Revised Code.
I second.
Second.
Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Mr. Simons.
Yes.
We will go into executive session and no action will be taken. Thank you.
Is the gang all here? Oh, there's Tom.
Hey,
You need a motion to come out of executive session?
Well, did you want to make it, Gina?
Oh, sure. I make a motion, we come out of executive session at 8:30 PM.
I'll second.
Were they recording us? I hope so.
We're on the Zoom thing. Is there
on Facebook, yeah.
any further discussion? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Everyone vote yes.
So
Yes.
moved.
Yes,
Mrs. Wider,
yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore.
Yes.
Excellent.
And yes.
Mrs. Cleveland.
I got you. I thought I got you first. You're number one on that list.
Did anybody second it?
Susan seconded it. I heard that.
Thank you.
Okay, now we need a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Petter?
Mrs. Wider,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes,
Mrs. Cleveland.
Yes.
it's a cool mask.
thank you.
We are adjourned.
All right.